Hi, and welcome to this video looking at secondary grading. And in this tutorial, we're going to look at the curves tool as an actual secondary grading option. So you might be familiar with curves already. In fact, let's just kind of pick an image. Tell you what, let's go to this one right here, and let's just do a reset on the tonal range. So you'll see we've got curves option, and obviously you can see there a diagonal line represents an unchanged image. If you want to know more about curves, I have put a lecture slide up on the previous week where I do talk about curves and how they work and how they're manipulating a value. But if we wanted to do a tonal range, so we've still got our shadows, our midtones here, and our highlights at the top. So I could just do that and pull the highlights up. Oops, sort of took a life of its own there just at the end. So I could do that and then sort of do your standard S curve. Here we go. Oop, no, maybe not from up there. Let's try pulling it from down here. That's better. There we go. Seems to want to jump. I think it may have some form of snapping on. There we go. But I've got kind of like a standard S curve, a little bit further down than I expected right at the bottom there. There we go. Okay, and so I'm really just doing what I would do with a color wheels. All right, so that is not secondary grading. That is just sort of pulling and adjusting my curves. In fact, I might want to pull that up a bit there as well. So I might want to take sort of the gamma up a little bit. Okay, so I've done my shadows, my gamma, sorry, with using the terms here, my lift, my gamma, and my gain. Okay, but like I said, that's not secondary grading. That's just doing the same thing you do with color wheels. Generally, I find color wheels easier to work with, hence why I've kind of stuck with those more than curves in my tutorials. However, I might want to use some there are some secondary controls as well, so we're going to have a look at those. But in order to do that, I'm going to jump to this clip here. And I would say with a lot of these clips, by the way, which I've used in the other tutorials, they are kind of designed to really work with the type of example I'm using. By the way, they're kind of tailored to that, and this one is a prime example of that. So by the way, with each control, same thing with color wheels. By the way, you'll notice that you actually have, when you go into it, you have a few other options that are available on there. And actually, this is quite interesting because I always refer to them as shadows, midtones, and highlights, and we do have an option where we can do that. And whether it's just yeah, it does seem to actually, no, it's got a slight change as well as to how it works. So I was going to say, so there are some variances there between it. The curves are the same. There's actually a whole range of curves here that we've got. And so we're going to look, but all of these are secondary grading curves. We're going to have a quick look at these. So if we go to this, right, so here, there's actually two strong colors, really. You've got the greens around the outside and you've got the orange, sorry, greens on the background and everywhere else, and you've got this orange on our subject in the jumpsuit. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier to kind of grade because there's two strong colors we've got to work with there. So let's have a look at how we do that. So notice, obviously, the first one was our standard curves, but then we've got what's called a hue versus hue. We've got a hue versus saturation, and we've got a hue versus luminance. So I'm going to look at those. Right, you kind of get what the other two do once we've looked at those, but we're going to look at these three. Okay, so in a sense, if you forget the versus bit, we've got one that's for hue, one that's for saturation, and one that's for luminance. So those are three things that we usually use to manipulate color: hue, saturation, and luminance. So basically, the reason it's called hue versus each one of those things is because if you think about it, hue is represented here. We've got all the hues going from red, orange, greens, yeah, cyans, blues, and so on, into magentas and back into red. So you notice it ends with the red there, and it sort of starts with the red here. You can literally think of this line as a color wheel, okay, which is sort of been cut right there and just straightened out as a line. Okay, and so we have a curve line here. So our standard curve line in this example was a diagonal line. Here we've got it as a straight line. And basically we can adjust or manipulate anything we want, any point we want. But when we do it, we're going to change the hue. Okay, so we'll change the color. Remember, hue is color. If I do it on this one, I'll change the saturation. And if I do it on this one, I'll change the luminance. So probably the best way to understand it is to just have a look. So we've got green here. Okay. In fact, I won't do it on the hue versus hue because it's a weird change. Let's go to saturation. So remember, saturation is the amount of color that you have in something. So if you have no saturation, you've got a black and white image. If you have saturation, a lot of it, you've got a deeper color. So the background is green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a few points here. And on my green, I'm going to pull it down. And what should happen is, hopefully, let's pull that down as well, the saturation will go down. So if I go up, the image becomes more saturated. If I pull down, it becomes less saturated. So hopefully you can see that there, that the background, the green, has sort of disappeared. So if I disable that, you can see that's what it looked like before, and that's what it's looking like now. So what's happening is, like I said, really you're only interested in the second word. I know it always says hue versus, but it only says hue versus because we're using this hue. So we've just reduced the saturation. Okay, is what we've done. So yeah, we can then let's go to the luminance one. Let's try the same and see if we can do much there. If I pull that down, it should reduce the overall brightness with this one. Okay, oh, actually no, it won't work now because there's no green. I'm doing it on the green, but there's very little green to exist. So that's interesting. Okay, so I'll undo that. So okay, one at a time we could work on it though. So yeah, so that's kind of what's gone on there. If I go to the hue versus hue, for example, so I could go to the orange, and you'll see if I pull that up, it's changing the hue of the top. Now it's going to be a bit weird, and like I said, I wouldn't generally do that here, but you can see that's kind of what's going on there. So let's reset that. So basically you have the ability to adjust the values of an image based on either its saturation, its hue, or its luminance using the curves. And then you've got the same thing here, and this is just doing it via a luminance value, so you can change the saturation based on the original image's brightness, and you can change it based on the saturation. I don't generally use those. I think I'd recommend you try these. If we reset the saturation one for a second and we go to the luminance this time, now we're back to the original image. If I click that, I should be able to reduce the overall brightness, hopefully, on the green. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, it doesn't really seem to want to change the luminance much at all. Okay, it's working there, so you can see it is working, but because it's happening on the top, but very little on the green. But give it a play, see what you can do. There was a slight shift I noticed there, but difficult to try. Sorry to see, but have a go and see what you can achieve.